Hi, welcome to Jovie's home. When I started this YouTube channel like 2+ years ago, I posted a video about the different types of paid and unpaid leave that's available to working parents or parents employed under Dutch employment law. Now, there have been some changes in the last year, and so I wanted to recreate or create this updated version. I also hope that this video shows my non-Dutch viewers a little bit about employment and social rights that the Netherlands has in place. I'm not saying that this is the best in the whole wide world, but it is pretty great, and I, for one, appreciate and am grateful for it. So in this video, I will cover maternity and paternity leave, the child benefit payment, adoption leave, parental leave, sick leave, care leave, and emergency leave. So if that sounds good to you, then why don't you come on in, kick off your shoes and stay a while. I'm really glad you're here. We have 2 Dutch words of the day, and those Dutch words are ouders, which means parents, and kinderen, which means children. Now, before we get started, it is important to mention that these are kind of the basic rights guaranteed by the Dutch government. Each employer may offer additional rights and benefits, but these are the minimums guaranteed under Dutch law. There are also some international organizations operating in the Netherlands who do not fall under Dutch employment law, at least the rules. So, for example, the United Nations and some other associated institutions, possibly some other places. But their benefits might look different than what I describe in this video. So without further ado, let us just get into this video. Pregnancy and maternity leave for women with a Dutch employer. In total, you are entitled to pregnancy and maternity leave that is 16 weeks long. Pregnancy leave begins between 6 and 4 weeks before your due date. During your pregnancy, you will be asked to provide your employer with a statement from your midwife or your doctor or birth practitioner, which indicates your actual expected due date. Based on this date, you can choose whether you stop working 6, 5, or 4 weeks before that date. If you choose to stop working 6 weeks beforehand, then you will have 10 weeks of maternity leave after the baby is born. If you stop working 5 weeks before, then you have 11 weeks afterwards. And if you stop 4 weeks before, then you have 12 weeks afterwards. But in total, 16. Now, if you stop working 6 weeks before the due date and then the baby is 2 weeks late, you still get at least 10 weeks after the birth. So you would actually end up getting a total of 18 weeks. If you are pregnant with twins or multiples, then some different rules apply. In this case, you are entitled to a benefit lasting 20 weeks minimum. Your pregnancy leave will start 10, 9, or 8 weeks before your due date. And you will then have 10, 11, or 12 weeks of maternity leave afterwards. There are also some special rules that apply if your child is hospitalized for more than 7 days after birth. And similarly, if you have a traumatic experience during labor or you struggle with severe postpartum depression or other symptoms, then you might go on sick leave in connection with your maternity leave, which will effectively extend your benefits. Now, your employer will be your main contact and will arrange everything with the UWV on your behalf. During this time, you have to communicate through your employer and with your employer, who will then correspond with the government or the UWV, who is going to be paying your leave. In terms, though, your salary will continue to be paid out through your employer in most cases, so you don't have to take on extra stuff. Your employer will be reimbursed for your salary through the UWV, so you as the employer don't end up paying extra. Now let's move on to the non-birth giving partner. This applies to the partner of the birth giver, obviously. For ease of reference, I'm calling it paternity leave, but I want to be clear that this also applies to, for example, lesbian partnerships or marriages as well. Paternity leave is split up into 2 different categories. If you work full-time, then you are entitled to 5 days off paid at 100%. And this should be taken immediately after the baby is born. Then, within the first 6 months of the baby's life, you can take an additional 5 weeks off, which will be paid at 70%. If you are self-employed, especially a self-employed expectant mother, then you have to arrange for the maternity leave benefits directly with the UWV on your own behalf. If you work as a full-time freelancer, then your maternity leave will be paid at 100% of the Dutch minimum wage. At the time of filming of this video, which is March 2021, the minimum wage amount is €1,684.80 a month, and that is what you would get regardless of how much you earned as a freelancer. If you are the self-employed partner of a pregnant person, then you are only entitled to the 5 days of paid paternity leave and not the extra 5 weeks. There is a special sad circumstance I want to talk about, which is that if your baby is born prematurely and passes away after your 24th week of pregnancy, then you are still entitled to 16 weeks of paid leave. Adoption or foster leave. Adoptive parents are entitled to 6 weeks of paid leave. You choose when you take it and whether it lasts 6 weeks or less. However, the leave must be taken anywhere from 4 weeks before the arrival of your adopted or foster child and up to and including 22 weeks afterwards. This is paid at 100% and for each parent. But I want to raise a question here, and I would love to hear from you guys if you know the answer to this. Basically, I want to know, what happens if you adopt a newborn baby? Like, you and your spouse bring home a baby that is 3 days old from the hospital. Why don't you get the 10 weeks the way that birthing moms do? I guess I don't understand. Like, can you even put a 6-week-old baby in daycare if you needed to? Like, I understand that if you are adopting or fostering an older child, then 6 weeks might be sufficient as an adjustment period and, getting used to each other. But in the cases where we're talking about newborn babies, like, this just doesn't seem to make sense, at least to me. So let me know in the comments if you have any additional information or if you know the answer to this question. Let's move on to child payment. Each child living in the Netherlands is entitled to what's called a child payment or kinderbijslag. This is a quarterly payment that is intended to help parents cover the cost of raising children and covering costs such as the children's clothing, food, diapers, school expenses, etc. To be eligible for the payment, you need to be registered and living in the Netherlands, although in some cases it applies outside the Netherlands too. The kinderbijslag is provided automatically to parents via the Social Verzekeringsbank, the SVB. If your child is born in the Netherlands, you will receive a letter to apply for the benefit. Otherwise, you can contact the SVB yourself and apply. In 2021, the amount per child per quarter is €223 for children aged 0 to 5, about €271 for children aged 6 to 11, and €319 per quarter for children from 12 to 17 years old. There are also different rates for parents with handicapped children, but we will make a separate video about people with special needs or disabilities at a later time. I want to note that if your employer offers benefits like an extra salary or a top-up if you have children, I'm thinking about the child allowance in the UN system, then you are not eligible for the SVB kinderbijslag. You can get one via your employer or get the one from the SVB, but you cannot double dip and get double child benefits. Moving on to parental leave or Ouderschapsverlof. Both parents are entitled to 26 times their weekly working hours as parental leave or Ouderschapsverlof. You get this leave per parent and per child. Now, typically this is unpaid leave that you arrange with your employer, and you can take it all in one chunk or more commonly as one unpaid day off per week as like a mamadag or a papadag. Now, the benefit to taking this leave is that your contract stays in place. So, for example, if you work full-time 5 days a week, then you take your one parental day off, your salary decreases to 80% unless you work for an employer who voluntarily pays for parental leave, but in most cases they don't. But if you lose your job or something happens, then you still have a full-time contract in place for the purpose of unemployment benefits. It also has some impact on your pension and other benefits. The bottom line here is don't immediately change your contract from 5 days to 4 days. Use your parental leave and keep your contract in place. It is in your best interest. And a pro tip, a lot of parents, particularly moms, who plan on going part-time after having a baby. However, if you can, go back to work after your maternity leave ends with your normal schedule. See what your tasks and what your role looks like upon your return, because things can change a lot in 4 months. So go back to work, get your workload back to normal, see what that looks like, and then negotiate your parental leave from there. Employers have been known to basically expect parents to carry a full-time workload on a reduced schedule and a reduced salary. However, if you go back to full-time, then you can see the expectations on you as a full-time employee and then negotiate a 20% reduction in workload while you're on reduced salary and on your parental leave. Pro tip. One final note about parental leave, and that is that at present, employees in the Netherlands are not paid for their parental leave hours, as I mentioned earlier, but this is about to change due to a new European directive that provides for 2 months of paid parental leave. We can expect to find out a bit more about that in July of 2022. There are also some special allowances for employees who are sick themselves or caring for other sick people or who have emergencies. I will briefly cover these. However, these benefits are available to all Dutch employees, not just parents. And different rules do apply to self-employed people. So what I'm covering in this next section applies to regular Dutch employees of Dutch employers. Sick leave. Sick leave is paid at 100% for the duration of your illness. If your illness lasts longer than 2 years, then you go on a different benefit scheme. But if it is less than 2 years, then you get 100% of your salary and your job is protected. This can apply for things such as postpartum depression, or if you have an extremely traumatic or physically complicated birth or recovery period. And in these cases, you might be eligible for some extra time away from work in addition to what we discussed earlier. There are only some doctors in the Netherlands who are able to prescribe a sick leave, and these guys are called the arbo-arts. Specifically, if you need, I think, leave for more than 2 weeks, then your employer will arrange for you to see one of these doctors in addition to your own medical team. If your sickness is for less than 2 weeks, so for example, if you have the flu and your house arts tells you to stay home and have paracetamol, then I don't think the arbo-arts gets involved. However, do let me know if you work for an employer and they get the arbo-arts involved a little bit earlier than for 2 weeks. That, in my case, for all my jobs, it was 2 weeks or less. Your house arts, or more than that, arbo-arts. An incredible feature of this system is also, like, imagine you go on a 3-week holiday and you become ill. Now, you can report your illness to your employer even though you're on holiday. And then during your illness, like the days that you are away from your vacation are counted as sick days and not vacation days. It's really, really cool. Care leave. Care leave is intended for people who need to take time off in order to care for someone else who is sick, like a sick child, for example. Each employee is entitled to 12 days of care leave. Care leave is paid at 70% of your salary. Emergency leave. Emergency leave is really for emergencies, and there is no limit to how long it lasts. It is paid at 100% as long as it's reasonable. So for example, if your boiler bursts and you have some kind of flooding issue that takes 4 hours to resolve, then you can have 4 hours of emergency leave. Or, if it takes 2 days, then you have 2 days, like whatever the case may be. But you cannot take like 1 month of emergency leave for something that it takes like 2 days to correct. So you guys, that is today's video. I hope that you found it informative and helpful. I will leave links to the government agencies that I talked about in the description box below if you would like to have more information or read about it yourself. Again, this was a general video, and of course there can be different rules in some special circumstances that I did not cover. I cannot cover them all, so I've stuck to the basics here. I want to say thank you so much for coming over. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you in the next one. Doei!